Live in World Literature News, the Decameron. In a world where a deadly and terrifying plague stalks the city, a group of 10 noble ladies and gentlemen flee for their lives. Their hope, survival. Their chances, only fortune knows. Welcome to World Literature News, your daily dose of literature. And for today's literature, the Decameron. In Florence, Italy, in 1348 was hit by a Black Death plague epidemic. And this plague is highly contagious disease. And this disease was infecting the people from east to west side of Florence, Italy. Now, the plague can spread through not only by a physical interaction but also through clothing and through touching of the infected person. Now, the plague can spread through touching clothing, and this plague has no medicine yet, and scientists has no discovered medicine for this kind of epidemic or disease. Now, these are the following symptoms you can acquire when you have this disease. You have lumps on groin, on the neck, on the pit area, and purple spots are spotted around the body of the infected person. Now, in Florence, Italy, dead people are just like rags scattered along the street on the floor of the Italy, which is this havoc may cause a great disaster of all times. Florence, Italy of 1348 reporting become like a post-zombie apocalyptic society. Except the dead stay dead and the living went into hiding. More than half of the people of the Florence, Italy, more than half of its population has gone and died due to this epidemic. Boccaccio itself has personal experience of this epidemic, wherein his father and her mother has died. Her stepmother, rather, has died. So this epidemic creates a mini society of 7 ladies and 3 gentlemen who hit the road in escaping towards this epidemic. In this physical danger, societal breakdown, and misery that comes with the loss of entire families. On the church of Santa Maria Novella, 7 ladies are seen attending the service of Mass. These ladies ranges ages to 18 to 28 years old, namely Pampinea, Diamata, Filomena, Emilia, Loretta, Nephilia, Eliza. And these ladies are trying to escape the city to countryside. Upon their journey of survival, they meet 3 handsome young men, namely Panfilo, Philostrato, and Euneo. The group has decided, and during their discussion, they have decided to go to a Pilato. Pilato is a large villa where they can stay with a large garden. Upon discussion also, in order to entertain themselves and divert their attention to the current situation, they have decided that each member will be a monarch for a day. The monarch will tell a story, and this story will consist of 10 novels. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to give us the first and the second day report, we have Mr. John. Mr. John, your cue now.
Thank you, Kurt. For the first day, here are the first story. So, the first story is all about Sir Serpent. It is a storytelling by Panfilo. The scoundrel in question is called Master Separani. He's so bad that a wealthy merchant named Francesi hires him to do some money collecting among the Burgundians. Basically, he's not the guy you want your sister to marry. So, off goes Sayapelito to Burgundy to work his magic. As Sayapelito gets sicker, the 2 Florentines find themselves in a tricky situation. It would be really awkward if a man who wanted their last rites died in their house. Sayapelito tells some serious whoopers during the confession, making the holy man think that he's led in a saintly life. Sayapelito having a good time with his life, even though he misses something important. The friar reminds him that no sin is too big to be forgiven if you are truly sorry for it. Our scoundrel doesn't really care about this. Sayapelito dies in the same day. The friar and his fellows bury him with honors, believing that miracles will happen through the Saint Man's intercession. Pretty soon, people make pilgrimages to the church to pray and make offerings to the Sayapelito. These convincing lies made the friar made the people believe so strongly in his saintliness that people claim miracles work in Sayapelito's name. Panfilo ends his story by praising God in his generosity, since he was clearly rewards for his faith in his people despite of their ignorance. So the second story is all about the Abraham and Jehanot the Giovanni. In the storyteller by Nephi, Giovanni, the Japanese, is friends with an honest and upright Jewish man called Abraham. He really wants Abe to convert to Christianity so he doesn't burn in hell. But Abraham also finds them to be money grabbers of the worst order. They sell their grandmas for their luck. He's pretty disgusted, so he returns to France. He tells Giovanni about the ungodliness of the Christian clergy and how well they practice all the 7 of the deadly sins. In conclusion, Abraham decides to become a Christian. Giovanni is stunned. Abraham explains that the church is growing and flourishing despite the wickedness of its leaders, so it really must be a religion built by the Holy Spirit. Giovanni takes Abraham to Notre Dame and stands up as his godfather. He gives Abe to name John. Giovanni becomes a good and responsible godfather, hiring the best masters of the religion to instruct his friends. So the third story, the first day, is Melchizedek and Saladin. It is a storytelling by Philomena. The great Sultan Saladin had spent all his vast fortune in wars and finding himself in a pinch. He tried to persuade a Jewish man called Melchizedek to lend him some money. But this caused a problem because after his father's death, they can find that the rings are so alike. They can't decide who should inherit them. Saladin says that Melchizedek is a wise and instead of roughing him up, tells him exactly what funds he needs. They came to an understanding, and after a time, Sultan pays him back and forth. He also showers Melchizedek with a gift, and they become best friends. The fourth story is all about the monk and the abbot. It is a storytelling by Dioneo. There was a young monk in Louisiana who came upon a beautiful peasant girl gathering herbs nearby his monastery. The abbot makes a villain for a young monk's room. You can probably imagine what he does when he finds the lovely girl there. I didn't realize that we monks are women to support. He jokes. He promises to do better next time. So the young monk is away with his offense and finds a way to bring back the girl for more visits. Fifth story is about the marchioness of Montferrat and the French king. It is storytelling by Fiametta. The Marquis of Montferrat has a wife who is beautiful and virtuous beyond every other woman in the world. So she consults with a female advisor she has left and comes up with a plan. When the king meets her, he is immediately struck by the arrow of love. He can't wait to sweet talk her doing what he wants, but as he's eating dinner, he realizes that this is a kitchen. You don't need to go fishing for a woman after a king, since beautiful women are everywhere, say the Marquis. The king immediately ashames of his intentions and gets on his way to the crusade as quickly as he can. The six stories are all about the good man and the inquisitor. It is storytelling by Emilio. There was a Franciscan friar in Florence who was supposed to be an inquisitor, but who was really in it for the money, not for the faith. When the wealthy man's brought in, the friar makes sure that the man is scared enough to believe that he'll burn at the stake of his offenses. One morning, the good man goes to church and hears the praise of the gospel that he knows will serve him well. For everyone you shall receive 100-fold, so he memorizes it. He's been watching how the friar gives away surplus vegetables brought to the poor in huge quantities. If they were able to get the 100-fold for each one, says the good man, the friars would run it in the afterlife. He dismisses the good man from him forever to avoid more embarrassment. The seven stories are about Bergamino and Cangrande. It is a storytelling by Philostrato. Bergamino got nothing for his patience, except an enormous bill from the inn where he stayed. Cangrande eventually looked at the bed and asked him what could possibly be wrong. When he arrives at the monastery, sure enough they're preparing a sumptuous breakfast. He finally thinks to ask whose Primus is. When he finds out, he is appealed. Primus is a grandman. In the end, Bergamino lives with a lovely robe, money, arrows, and horse to access to the Cangrede's home for as long as he wants to stay. The eighth story is all about the juggling of Bosher. It is a storytelling by Loretta. Loretta Emilio asked Giovanni if he can think of any completely novel subject that he might have painted on the walls at his home. And there's a bonus. Ermino took Giovanni's comics so much to heart that he became the best and the most generous gentleman in the city. The ninth story is about the king of Cyprus and a woman of Gascony. The lady despairs but thinks that she'll feel better if she at least this is the king for his attitude. But the king feels the stink of her comments. He finally gets some courage. He punishes the lady's assailants and stands for up to all the evildoers of his kingdom. So the 10th story of the first day is all about the Master Alberto of Bologna. Master Alberto is an old physician who finds himself consumed by love for a beautiful young woman named Margarida. One day, Margarida and friends decides to have some fun with Alberto. They can invite him to have some wine or snacks with them. Who knows? Maybe Margarida has a thing for old men, so he'll keep going. And she tells Alberto that he'll clearly worthy to be loved and he's welcome to ask anything about her. Each day we deliver the best hard-hitting analysis of a literary list. I am John. This is the first day of the Decameron news circle. Thank you, Kurt. For the second day, it is all about the Martellino. It is a story of the Nepha. Martellino says he'll confess to the crime if the man can say where it happened. Meanwhile, Marchis and Stitchy go back to their lodgings and ask for the landlord to help them. He felt sorry for their bad luck, so he gives them each new set of clothes. So the men return to Florence in one piece and richer by a new suits of clothes. The second story of the second day is Rinaldo Dieste and the Widow. The storyline by Philostrato. Rinaldo Dieste is a merchant who hooks up with some respectable-looking travelers on his way home to Bologna. He wonders out loud who will have the better lodgings at night, whose prayers will be answered. Of course, the thief knows that he and his comrades plans to mug Rinaldo that night and steal his money. Rinaldo says that there's a house jutting out from the castle walls, so he makes little mess for himself there. He does plenty of complaining to St. Julian. Thanks for nothing. The lovely lady takes Rinaldo in, lets him bed, feeds him the dinner meant for Marquis, and dresses him in their late husband's clothes. Since she was already in the mood for the love, and Rinaldo's handsome, the two decide to make the most of the night. How could it be better? Well, the three thieves were caught in the night, and all of Rinaldo's belongings were restored to him. In the end, St. Julius didn't keep us in the end of the bargain, and Rinaldo had no need to complain. The twists and turns of fortune. The third story of the second day is Alessandro and the Abbot, the storytelling by Pampenia. Three young men, Lamberto, Tibaldo, and Agulante, inherited the enormous fortune of their father and proceeded to burn through. It is pretty lucky by extravagant living. As they ride along, romance blossoms between Alessandro and the Abbot. Pretty soon, the Abbot offers them the position in the household. In Rome, the Abbot reveals himself to the Pope. She is a daughter of the King of England and destined to marry the older King of Scotland. Alessandro and his bride live happily in England until he conquers Scotland with the help of his family. The fourth story is all about Landolfo Ruffolo and the Power of Fortune. The storytelling by Loretta. It also forces two geniuses ships to harbor there. They recognize Landolfo's resistance and decide to reclaim some of the booty for themselves. Once there, he cashes in the jewel, sends sums of money to the women in the Corfu and to the others that help him to get back home, and lives happily ever after without having returned into the business world. The fifth story, the second day, is about Androchia, the storytelling by Fiametta. Fiordaliso lives in the part of town called the Flesh Pot. Yeah, it's what you think, but Androchia doesn't know this. So now, he's locked out over how standing in the street with only his dog left and who is covered by filth and from the garbage in the hallway. On their way to raid the town, they realize that Androchio is still sick, so they stop at the well to give him a bath. The grave robbers think the dead archbishop is trying to eat them. They leave the town open and run away. So in the end, Fiametta says Androchio would have invested in a ring rather than buying himself for some horses. The sixth story is all about Madame Beritola. A man called Arrigato Capesi governed the island of Sicily during the reign of the Manfred. Now, we have a love story to this drama. Curado's daughter, Spina, comes home with the widows and falls in love with Ianotto. The feelings mutual. Ianotto, now called Geoffredi, asks Corrado to send someone to fetch his younger brother and the nurse. He also requests that an emissary be sent to Sicily to find out about his father. After more days of feasting, Madame Bertola and her family get on a ship and sail for Sicily. In the end, the media says the man is to live happily ever after. He thinks she thinks anyway. The seventh story is all about Alethea in the storytelling by Panfellow. If you want to be happy, you've got to accept your life as it was. He gives a shout out to the ladies, women, and Georgia decided to be beautiful. He was going to tell a story that combines these two ladies about a woman who was unfortunately beautiful. But which means in this world that they live happily ever after. The eighth story is all about the Count of Antwerp. It is storytelling by Elisa. So this water Count of Antwerp is left behind to govern all France when the king and his son go for a war against the Germans. He hides his love for Jeanette, and we all know that doing this will only result in their illness. So the whole family joyfully reunited for a time in France where Walter remains for the rest of his life. The 10th story is all about Paganino and Ricciardo. It is storyteller by Dioneo. Paganino counters, if she is in fact his wife and she wants to go with him, then so be it. Back in Monaco, word reaches Paganino that Bartolomena's and now a widow. So he didn't take the opportunity to make Bartolomea his proper wife. So each week we deliver the best hard-hitting analysis of the literary news. I am John. This is the second day of the Decameron news report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. For the third day, Nephi is queen on this day. She suggests they skip Friday and Saturday, days of religious observance, and reconvene on Sunday. She also moves the brigada to a different palace, one with a magnificent garden. Nephi asks 4 stories about ingenious people who have gotten something they wanted, or regained something they've lost through their wits. On the third day, first story, the storyteller is Philostrato, who will tell a tale that will bust those wits wide open. A man called Newton returned home after working for some time as a gardener at a convent famed towards sanctity. A young man named Masetto talks to him about his time with the nuns and decides to apply for the gardening job himself. Because he is young and handsome, Masetto is afraid he won't be hired and pretends to be deaf and mute. He goes to the convent then through sign language. He speaks to the steward and helps him with various chores. He ends up as the gardener. Masetto is napping in the garden one day when 2 nuns begin to talk near him. They've heard of the pleasure of the flesh and wish to experience them for themselves, and think Masetto would be perfect for this since he would be unable to tell their secret. He happily goes along with their plan. Eventually, Masetto begins sleeping with all the nuns. The abbess eventually enjoys him for several days, but heard the man said he cannot satisfy all the other nuns. He finally speaks, claiming that God has finally performed a miracle, and tells the abbess everything that's been going on. She realizes they need to be more careful. The convent hires him as the steward. The old man had died just a few days prior, and things continue in the same manner. After a number of years, Masetto returns home, an old wealthy man fathering a number of children. On the third day, second story, Pompineia recounts the tale of King Agalu, his wife, and the groom. The groom falls in love with the king's wife and beds her while cleverly pretending to be the king. When Agaluf discovers this and realizes his wife knows nothing of how she's been duped, he investigates the servants and discovers it was the groom. King Agaluf cuts off a lock of the man's hair so he can identify him come morning. But the groom is wise to this ploy and cuts off a lock of all the servants' hair so the king cannot tell them apart. The king, realizing the cleverness of the groom, issues a warning to everyone, thus saving his reputation, his wife's honor, and ensuring the groom knows better than to try again. On the third day of the third story, the storyteller is Philomena. She wants to tell a story to prove that even the clergy are capable of being deceived. Philomena narrates the tale of a married woman, a fat friar, and a young man. The woman uses the friar as an unknowing go-between to arrange her affair with the young man without either her husband or the friar knowing. On the third day, fourth story, Panfilo tells the fourth story of the day. A pious man named Puccio has a beautiful young wife named Isabella. She and a monk named Don Feliz use Puccio's desire for saintliness to further their affair. While Puccio spends the night praying and performing penance, Isabella and Feliz are sleeping together. On the third day, fifth story, the storyteller is Elisa. A gentleman named Francesco is appointed governor of Milan and requires a fine horse on which to make his entrance. Zima has an excellent horse but is in love with Francesco's wife. Zima offers to give Francesco the horse if he can speak with his wife. Francesco agrees and then tells his wife to listen to Zima but not talk to him. Zima confesses his love, filling in her portions of the conversation when she doesn't speak, and they arrange a signal to meet while her husband is away, circumventing his rules. Day 6 story, Fiametta narrates. Ricciardo is a married man, but he has fallen in love with Catella, who is married to Filippello. She is jealously possessive of her husband, and Ricciardo uses this to his advantage, and convinces Catella that his wife is having an affair with her husband, and they intend to meet in a Turkish bathhouse. Instead, Ricciardo goes to the bathhouse and pretends to be Catella's husband. When she discovers she is left with Ricciardo and not Filippello, he convinces her to continue their affair. On the third day, seventh story, Emilia tells the story of a man named Tidaldo who is in love with a married woman, Ermelina. When she cuts off her affections, he leaves and makes his fortune in Cyprus. After 7 years away, he returns to his home only to find his brothers in mourning and Ermelina's husband in jail for his murder. After discovering why Ermelina spurned him, a friar told her to risk damnation. He convinces her to restart their affair, frees her husband, and helps catch the real murderers who killed a man who looked just like him. On the third day, eighth story, Lauretta narrates the eighth tale. An abbot falls in love with jealous Ferrando's wife. He mixes a powder into Ferrando's wine, which causes everyone to think he is dead. Ferrando is in tomb, but the abbot removes him to a cell inside the cloister and tells Ferrando he is in purgatory. The abbot visits Ferrando's wife while being punished until she becomes pregnant with the abbot's child. He gives Ferrando another dose of drugged wine, puts him back in his tomb, and watches as he returns from the dead. Ferrando returns to his wife, thinks the son she bears is his, and stops being such a jealous husband. On the third day, ninth story, Nephile's tale centers around a doctor's daughter named Gillette and a nobleman named Bertrand. Gillette falls in love with Bertrand, following him to Paris, where she ends up curing the king of France of a fistula. In return for her help, he says he will find her a husband, and she requests Bertrand, who does not want to marry her. They marry, but do not consummate their union as Bertrand leaves for Italy. In his absence, Gillette runs his estates wisely, but asks him to return. Bertrand tells Gillette he will live with her only based on certain conditions. Gillette goes to Florence to find out Bertrand has been wooing a young woman, whose mother does not approve of him. They hatch a scheme where Gillette pretends to be the young woman, gains a secret ring, and becomes pregnant with twins. When she finally confronts Bertrand in public, he accepts her, and they live in happiness. On the third day, 10th story, Juneo narrates the final story of the day. In Tunisia lives a 14-year-old girl named Alibek. While not a Christian, Alibek was impressed by those Christians around her and asked one how best to serve God. She was told she should deny the things of the world. She takes the words to heart and sets out by herself for the Egyptian desert. She arrives at the hut of a holy man, said she wishes to learn how to serve God. Fearful he might be tempted by her beauty, the holy man directs her to another holy, much holier man. This occurs several times until she finally comes upon a young hermit named Rustico. Seeing Alibek is young and beautiful, Rustico wishes to test himself against temptation and does not send her away. He finds himself unequal to the task and begins to think of a way to sleep with her. He tells her the best way to serve God is to put the cold evil back in hell. When she asks how to do this, he tells her to follow what he does. They both end up naked and kneeling opposite each other in prayer. Since Alabek is a virgin, she doesn't know what she's seeing when Rustico becomes a wreck. He tells her it is the devil, and she has a place inside of her known as hell where she has to put it. The euphemism for sex continues throughout the story with Alabek none the wiser. She soon becomes so enamored with putting the devil in hell, Rustico can no longer keep up with their stamina, and tries to find a way to rid himself of her. During this time, Alabek's father and brothers are killed in a house fire, and she is the sole heir. A young man named Ripale comes to find her, and Rustico happily gives Alabek over to him to marry. When some women in the city ask Alabek how she served God out in the desert, she tells them how she put the devil in hell. The women are amused and tell her she will have plenty of opportunity to serve God as Ripale's wife. For the conclusion of the third day, the ladies may be virtuous, but they find Junia's outrageous story absolutely hilarious and can stop shaking with laughter. After they pull themselves together, Nephi hands off the crown to Philostrato, the first king of the bunch. Nephi remarks that they'll now be able to see if the wolf can lead the sheep any better than the sheep have led the wolves. Philostrato has a vulgar reply, and Nephi pluckily tells him that the woman could teach him a thing or two. Philostrato gives instructions to his steward for the next day and then declares his miserable theme, loves that end unhappily. He explains that, as his name suggests, the one shut down by love, he constantly gets his heart trampled on by love. Janae is going to have his hands full with this Debbie Downer. They all stick around the miraculous garden to play a bit longer, and then Philostrato asks Lauretta to dance and sing. Lauretta says she only knows songs that she composes herself. Philostrato is okay with that and asks her to proceed. She sings a lamentation of a widow who loses her perfect love and then decides to marry again. Her friends spend time interpreting the lyrics in their own ways and singing some more. For the fourth day, Philostrato is the king, and he chooses stories filled with people whose love ends unhappily. This is about a Florentine called Filippo Balducci, who was of low social status but was otherwise an upright guy. He's married to a lovely lady and they're happy together. But Filippo loses his good lady and decides to retreat from the world with his young son. He goes to live in a cave with the boy and spends all his time praying and fasting and shunning all worldly things. When the boy grows to be a young man of 18, he asks his father to take him to Florence when he goes to pick up supplies. He'd never really left the cave before. Filippo is certain that his son could never be attracted to worldly things because he'd been raised otherwise, so he decides to take the boy along. Of course, the boy is dazzled by all the buzz of the city, but it's not until he sees a group of beautiful young women that he's totally captivated. He asks his dad what those lovely creatures could be. Filippo tells him that they're called goslings and to look away because they are evil. The boy doesn't believe him and immediately asks his father to get one of the goslings for him. He urges Filippo to bring one home for him so that he can pop things into its bill. Filippo explains to him that he knows nothing of where their bill really is and what it likes to eat. But Filippo knows he's defeated. Nature will win out. So Boccaccio leaves his tale at that, expecting that you will understand what you're meant to understand. Now he turns back to the stories and the storytellers. Philostrato wakes up at the crew and they hit the breakfast table, do their siesta, and then head out to the fountain for some story time. Philostrato chooses Fiammetta to begin. For the fourth day, first storyteller is Fiammetta, who confesses that she doesn't understand why they're telling such dismal tales when they're supposed to be cheering themselves up. Still, she wants to show that she can play the game, so she's going to tell a truly horrendous tale. Tancredi has a beautiful daughter called Gismunda that he loves so much he didn't want to marry her off. Eventually, he gives her up to the Duke of Capua, but the Duke dies early and Gismunda returns home again. Gismunda had a lover privately named Giscardo. Tancred knew about their secret relationship and imprisoned Giscardo. He then talked to his daughter about it and asked her to choose a resolution. After a while, he ordered his men to strangle Giscardo and take out his heart, put it into a golden cup, and give it to his daughter. Gismunda receives it knowingly whose heart it was and cried. After lamenting over it, she asked the water with poison which she prepared into the golden cup where the heart is, and drink it without leaving any drop. Tancred was called by Gismunda's maids and saw her lying on the bed with the golden cup on her chest. Gismunda tells him that he's just getting what he wanted and that if he really does feel sorry about the whole thing, he should bury the two lovers together. She dies, clutching Giscardo's heart chalice to her chest. Tancredi is sorry for his actions but too late. To make amends, he buries the two lovers together in a public ceremony. On the fourth day, second story, Pampinea narrates this story about a wicked man who moves to Venice, named Berto della Massa from Imola, where people don't know of his bad reputation. He pretends to be a friar named Brother Alberto da Imola. He is such a good con man, his priestly sermons beguile anyone who listens to him. A foolish woman named Lisetta comes to him for confession. When Brother Alberto asks whether she has a lover, she tells him she is too beautiful to take just anyone to bed. He begins plotting how best to get her sleep with him. After a few days, he apologizes for asking such a question. He tells her God has punished him by sending the angel Gabriel to beat him with a stick for daring to besmirch the woman he loves. She is impressed and believes him. Brother Alberto then tells her Gabriel wishes to visit her at night, but since he is an angel, he must do so in the body of a man. Lisetta agrees Brother Alberto should be the man Gabriel inhabits. That night, Brother Alberto disguises himself to appear more angelic and visits Lisetta. In the morning, Lisetta visits Alberto to tell him everything that happened with Gabriel. He pretends to have no memory of the affair. This continues until Lisetta tells a woman of what goes on between her and the angel Gabriel. The woman spreads the tale until everyone in Venice hears, and including Lisetta's in-laws. They determine to find out the truth and watch Lisetta's bedroom for signs of Gabriel. When Brother Alberto appears, they are there and he must jump out of the window and into the canal to save himself. Alberto is taken in by a man who hides him. After finding out who Alberto really is, the man asks for 50 ducats to keep his secret. The man then says he will help smuggle Alberto out of his house by leading him around dressed as a bear. Instead, the man covers him in honey and feathers, puts a chain around his neck and a mask over his face, and leads him to St. Mark's Square. The man removes Alberto's mask and introduces him to the crowd as the angel. Everyone recognizes Alberto and they attack him until several other friars show up. The friars take Alberto back to the monastery and lock him in a cell where he eventually dies. For the fourth day, third story, Lauretta narrates. 3 sisters love 3 young men and run away with them to the island of Crete. The eldest sister discovers her lover's attention has wandered, and she kills him out of jealousy. To save her life, the second sister gives herself to the Duke of Crete. When her lover finds out, he kills her and runs away with the eldest sister. The third sister and her paramour are charged with the murder. They are arrested but escape after bribing the guards. They leave for roads where they live in poverty until death. For the fourth day, fourth story, Elisa tells this tale of Urbino, the grandson of King William II of Sicily. He falls in love with the daughter of the King of Tunis, and she returns his feelings although they have never met. When Urbino discovers she is to be wed to the King of Granada, he, against his grandfather's orders, goes to intercept the bride-to-be. She is killed right in front of Urbino, and he kills everyone in his grief. When the King of Tunis complains to King William orders his only grandson beheaded for his actions. For the fourth day, fifth story, Philomena tells a story about Lisabetta and Lorenzo, 2 young people in love. Lorenzo is a man of lower social standing than Lisabetta and works for her brothers. One day, Lisabetta's eldest brother catches her going into Lorenzo's bedroom. He tells his brothers, and they devise a plan to get Lorenzo out of the city, where they murder him and bury his body. When they return, they tell Lisabetta they sent him away on business. Lorenzo appears to Lisabetta in a dream and tells her what happened to him, and tells her the spot where he is buried. She goes to the place with the serving woman who knew of their relationship and finds the grave. Lisabetta digs up the body, cuts off the head, and reburies the body. She returns home with the head. After crying over Lorenzo's head, she plants it in a pot with the finest basil and waters it with her tears. The care she lavishes on the plant causes it to grow lush and full, but her brothers notice her fading beauty and her strange behavior, and they take the pot from her room. She begins to waste away, asking for her pot of basil, so frequently her brothers decide to what's inside it. They find Lorenzo's head inside the pot. Fearing the murder will be discovered, they bury the head and leave for Naples. Lisabetta cries incessantly for the pot with her lover's head in it and eventually dies. For the fourth day, sixth story, Panfilo is the storyteller. The dream in the previous story by Philomena inspires Panfilo to tell another story about the significance of dreams. Panfilo equivocates about the power of dreams. Philomena's story proves that not all dreams are false. His story is going to support this idea. Andriola and Rubiotto are neighbors, and they fall in love. Because he is in a lower class than she is, they devise to meet in her garden in secret with the help of her maidservant. Gabriotto dies suddenly in her arms, but because the relationship was a secret, Andriola cannot call anyone to help with the body. When they try to deliver him to the doorstep of his house, Andriola and her maidservant are caught and brought before the magistrate. She refuses his advances, and when her innocence is proven, she and her maidservant enter a convent. For the fourth day, seventh story, Emilia narrates a story about 2 poor lovers, Pasquino and Simona. Emilia reminds the group that love also makes some pretty awesome displays among the poor. To prove this, she'll tell a story set in Florence. During the tryst, Pasquino picks some sage and rubs his teeth and comes with it. It is done at the time to clean the teeth. He dies almost immediately. Pasquino's friend accuses Simona of poisoning him and takes her before a judge. When the judge asks Simona to show him exactly what happened, she takes a piece of sage and rubs her teeth and comes with it. She falls down dead. The judge digs up the sage and finds a venomous toad. The bodies of the two lovers are buried together. For the fourth day, eighth story, Nephi tells this story. Love is one of those things that defies wisdom, knowledge, or outside pressure. Her story, therefore, will be about a woman who tried to outwit love and lost it all. Girolamo loves Silvestra, but his mother does not approve of the girl, so she sends Girolamo away to Paris. When he returns, Girolamo discovers Silvestra got married. He goes to her house in the middle of the night to talk to her, but she tells him she loves her husband. Girolamo holds his breath until he dies. Silvestra and her husband drop Girolamo's body off at his doorstep, and when he is discovered, everyone assumes he died of grief. At the funeral, Silvestra is grief-stricken over the memory of their love that she dies of grief on top of his body. They are buried together. For the fourth day, ninth story, Illustrato narrates. That's because this story involves people of a higher social standing. Two knights, Guillaume de Roussillon and Guillaume de Cabestan, were friends. Roussillon has a beautiful wife Cabestan falls in love with. She returns his feelings. When Roussillon finds out, he kills Cabestan and cuts out his heart. Roussillon orders it cooked and served it to his wife, only to tell her what she has eaten when she is finished. She throws herself out of the window, and she and Cabestan are buried together. For the fourth day, tenth story, Dineo is the narrator of this story. Dineo is pretty sick of all the doom and gloom. He refuses to participate any longer in the misery and plans to tell a story that should set an example for the next day's theme. A woman is married to an old doctor. She has an affair with a man named Ruggieri. During one of their trysts, Ruggieri takes a drug the doctor left out and passes out. The wife thinks he is dead and places him in a chest sitting outside her neighbor's house. While he is in there, two young men steal the chest and bring it home. When Ruggieri wakes up, he has no idea where he is. He is taken before the magistrate and is sentenced to hang. The doctor's wife convinces her maid to help her save Ruggieri by going to the magistrate and pretending to be Ruggieri's lover. Ruggieri's name is cleared and he is saved. For the conclusion of the fourth day, once again, Dineo saves the day with a funny story. Illustrato apologizes for making everyone so miserable with his tragic theme, and with that, he passes the crown to Fiammetta. He knows she'll fix things up with whatever theme she chooses, and Fiammetta makes sure this happens by declaring the next day Love's with Happy Endings Day. So they eat dinner by the fountain and sing and dance. Fiammetta commands Illustrato to sing the song for the end of the evening. She knows that his song will be miserable and wants to squeeze all the unhappiness into one day and then leave it there. He's actually happy to be miserable just for her, so he sings a lament about falling in love and being dumped. In it, he begs for death. So that was all for the third day and fourth day of the Decameron. Each week, we deliver the best hard-hitting analysis of literary news. I am Miles V. Incorporado, the third and fourth day of the Decameron News Report.
The Amnita is the queen for the day and deemed the theme of the stories to be a love affair with happy ending. In fifth day first story, Panfilo is first with a story about the young man who his father is so ashamed of his son's manners and appearance sent him away or leave in the country. When a young man saw a maiden in the wood, he changes his behavior and hygiene to be more appealing. The young man finds out she has been promised to a young nobleman of Rhodes. He kidnapped her, but they are captured by the sailors and taken before the magistrate. Meanwhile, the young nobleman's brother is in love with Cassandra, so the brothers plan a double wedding. The magistrate is also in love with Cassandra and makes a deal with the young man to steal both brides from the wedding. The young man kills the brothers, and after the time has passed, the man returns to their homeland with their wives. In the fifth day second story of the Decameron, Emilia narrates the second tale of the poor young man in love with a noble woman. He leaves town to make his fortune. She hears she's dead, but meanwhile, he has integrated himself with the king and is given a position in the king's court. She hears of this and goes to see him. They marry and return to Haley. Fifth day third story in the Decameron. Elisa tells the third tale. Man loves a woman with poor family. His family doesn't approve the marriage, so the two ran off as fast as they can. While lost in the country, they were attacked by the soldiers, so she escaped. But the man is captured but gets away to the lovers. Both make it to the same castle. The lady of the castle impressed by the story, so the lady offers to pay for the wedding and make a peace with his family. People around the world, everyone must go through a number of trials in order to earn a happy ending, usually with the help of fortune. In the fifth day fourth story of the Decameron, the illustrator tells the story of an older man and his wife who have a beautiful daughter named Katrina. A young man named Richard falls in love with her and she with him, and they make a plan to be together if she can manage to convince her parents to let her sleep in the balcony. So Richard will climb up to be with her, and Katrina complains it's so hot to sleep inside. So she can make a bed in the balcony outside of her parents' room. Her father refuses it. But Katrina complains get what she really wants, so Richard will climb up in the morning in the balcony and spend the whole night with Katrina. And they fall asleep together, so her father finds out they're naked in the balcony in the morning and sees Katrina's hands over Richardo. So he shouted at the wife and told her to see the nightingale of their daughter in her hand. Katrina's fathers realize Richardo is from the good family and would make an excellent mattress daughter, so he has them wed right on the spot. They publicly married few days after in front of their friends, relatives, and they live happily ever after. In the fifth day, fifth story of the Decameron, Nephal narrates a man raises his friend 10-year-old and she grows up to be very beautiful. Two men falls in love with her and they try to kidnap her. They're thwarted, but the gardeners reveals that the girl was found in the abandoned house when she was 2 years old. It's turned out that the house belongs to a man whose daughter has been lost at the time, and one of the kidnappers is her brother. So she ends up marrying the other kidnapper. In the fifth day, sixth story of the Decameron, Pampinea tells the story of a Sicilian pirate who kidnapped a woman she is presented to the king of Sicilia as a gift. Her lovers try to rescue her only to have a king catch them in the bedroom. The following morning, the king ordered them to burn at the stake, but the soldier recognized them and tells they are the children of my greatest supporters. The king orders and releases them and sends them home. In fifth day, seventh story of the Decameron, Loretta narrates captured as a boy by pirate and make a slave falls in love with his master's daughter, and they begin a secret relationship. When she became pregnant, she tells her father arranges for the slave to hang and give his daughter a choice of death by dagger or poison. While it's waiting in the gallows, three or many of the ambassadors see the slave and one of them recognizes his birthmarks. It's actually his son, taken by the pirate 15 years earlier. So father and the son are reunited and the wedding is allowed. In the fifth day, eighth story of the Decameron, Philomena narrates a story about the cruelty and love treated cruelly by the man, finds for doesn't return her affection. A man ends up leaving the city to camp in the countryside. While in the forest, he sees a woman running away from the night with a pack of dogs. It's turned out both of them are dead, like ghosts, and must replay and see this every week. The knight loved the lady, but he treated her terribly, so he killed himself and despaired the lady died soon after. Now the knight tried to kill her with a knife that he used. The man brings the woman and the father out to the forest so they can witness the scene, and father agrees to marry the two living souls. The fifth, ninth story of the Decameron, Ametta tells the story of Federico, who falls in love with Giovanna to win her favor. He jested, organized banquets and parties and generally spent his means. To no avail, Giovanna wouldn't even look at him. He ends up losing everything except his name, his farm, and his falcon. During this time, Giovanna's husband dies and leaves his fortune to their son, but makes Giovanna his her should their son die without any legitimate children. Giovanna and her son go to their estate and country which happen to be near Battery Goes Far. The boy becomes friends with Federico, and they hunt with the hawk together many times, but Giovanna's son falls ill and he says the only thing that will make him better. His Federico's falcon. Giovanna hates the truth of asking Federico's for the one thing that gives him pleasure, especially since she knows he'll like her but she'll do anything for her. So the son, she goes to Federico and says she wishes to share a meal with him to make amends for the harm she inadvertently caused him. He tells her he would happily do it all over again. Finding nothing to censure her, he ends up killing his falcon and serving it to her. After the meal, Giovanna tells Federico the errands that brought her to him. Hearing her gentle request, he cries openly and tells her he can't do what she asks, even though he would have to admit he kills his falcon for their meal. Giovanna thanks him for the honor he bestowed in return to her son without a bird. Disappointed, boy dies a few days later. Giovanna inherits her husband's fortune after the mourning period passes, so she will have no one but Federico, her brother's bulk in his poverty. Giovanna tells them she would rather not someone just be rich, but a poor person who was truly a man in his noble actions. And the fifth day 10 story of the Decameron. Pietro is a rich man more interested with another man, not a woman. To change the public opinion of him, he married a young woman but it's uninterested, satisfying his sexual need, so he decided to find a lover to satisfy his need. He's just not gonna do it, but be with friend with an old woman, tells her a right to pursue his plan. She is young and beautiful. One night, the young woman is busy entertaining the young man, but Pietro returns home early. He has the young man in the chicken room. Pietro tells his wife for the reason of his return. His friends caught his wife's slaver. Pietro's wife pretends to be outraged, but by chance, Pietro himself discovers he would be a lover of her. Pietro tells his wife he will make sure he is satisfied in the future, and then they both enjoy the young man's company. When the young man wakes in the next morning, he is curious whom he would end up sleeping. On the sixth day, first story of the Decameron, Philomena begins with the first story. Madonna Aurora accepts the offer of the knight to take her riding. Pleased to listen to him tell a story, but he tells it so poorly she begs him to let her down. The knight laughs at his poor storytelling ability. On the sixth day, second story of the Decameron, Pampinea tells a story. Christy is a very successful baker who has an extensive wine cellar. When a nobleman named Jerry comes by his bakery, the two men share some of Christie's wine. Jerry throws a banquet and invites Christie to it, but Christie declines. Jerry hopes Christie will share some of his wine despite not attending, so he sent a servant with a small flagon to collect some. The servant instead brings a much larger container, thinking to drink some of the wine for himself. Christie figures out what is going on, refuses. Jerry finally figures out what is going on and calls the servant. Christie sent a large amount of wine. Now that Jerry has proven he knows what his servants are up to. On the 6th day, third story of the Decameron, Lauretta narrates the story. Dago is a friend of the Bishop of Florence. He is a scoundrel who offers a husband 500 gold florins to spend the night with the man's wife. The husband accepts, but Dago pays him in a silver piece painted gold. The husband and family are humiliated when word gets out. While Dago and the bishop ride through town one day, they spy the beautiful Mona Nona. The bishop basically solicits her for Dago. Angered at the disrespect, she brings up Dago's cheating ways, embarrassing Dago and the bishop. On the 6th day, fourth story of the Decameron, this tale is narrated by Nephi. Corrado brings crane to his cook, Chichibeo, to prepare for dinner. As he cooking, the woman he is in love with arrives and asks for one of the crane's leg. Chichibeo lets her take out, but now he has to explain the missing leg to his lord. When he tells Corrado cranes only have one leg, the lord wants Chichibeo to prove it. The two men go out the next morning and they see a flock of cranes standing on one leg. Corrado shouts, surprising the cranes, and they all lowered their second leg. Chichibeo tells his lord, "You have to yell to get the second leg to drop." And he didn't yell before he cooked the bird. Corrado is amused. On the 6th day, fifth story of the Decameron, Panfilo tells the story of two intelligent but ugly men, Boris and the artist Giotto. Boris is a famous jurist and Giotto is a remarkable painter. The two met on the road both riding ugly horses and dressed shabbily, and they decide to ride together. They are caught in a rainstorm and take shelter with a mutual friend, but they are desperate to return to Florence. So they borrow hats and capes from their friend and continue on their way in the rain. When the rain finally lets up, Boris looks over at Giotto and laughs at his sorry appearance. He asks Giotto if a stranger sue him now. When he believed, "We're the best painter in the world," Giotto replied. "Looking you over, you were to think you knew your ABCs." Boris realized they both looked terrible and he had been insulted in the same way he had insulted Giotto. In the 6th day, sixth story of the Decameron, Famietta tells the story. Michel's cousin and his friend get into the debate about his Florentine family was the oldest and most noble. Michel thinks it is the Baronchi, and bets he can prove it. The loser has to buy his dinner. Michel explained that the oldest family would be the most noble, that the Baronchi family is so ugly they look like God's experiment of making people, so they would have to be the oldest and thus the noblest. No one can argue with that, so Michel wins the week. On the 6th day, seventh story of the Decameron, the illustrative story relates to a law that sentenced on adulteries to be burned alive. Madonna Filippo is caught by her husband, Rinaldo. He takes her before the magistrate and she confesses. She complains against the unfairness of the law. It only applies to women. She then asks the magistrate to ask her husband if she has ever not fulfilled the martial obligation. When he says he is satisfied, she asks what she is to do with everything she has left over. Everyone laughs and she is released. In the 6th day, 8th story of the Decameron, Emilia narrates the story. Seska is the vain niece of a man named Fresco. She returned home complaining about the ugliness of the people in the street. Fresco replies if she dislikes seeing horrible people, she should avoid looking in the mirror. Shiska does not understand the reference because she is said to be as dumb as any animal. She will never change or stop looking in the mirror. 6th day, 9th story of the Decameron. Eliza relates the following story. Beto Brunowski attempts to convince the poet Guido Cavalcanti to join him and his party-going friend, but Guido is not interested. When Beto finds Guido walking through the tombs, he and his friend ask him why he avoids them. Guido tells him why they are in their house. They can say anything about him they want. Then he leaves. Beto realizes Guido is just implied the cemetery in their house. Guido just insulted them. They leave Guido alone. 6th day, 10th story of the Decameron. Dionaio tells a story that takes place in Boccaccio's birthplace of Certaldo. The two young men Giovanni del Dragonaria and Biagio Pizzini hear his proclamation and decide to play a trick on him. While Cipolla is out to lunch, Biagio will keep the manservant busy while Giovanni goes to the brother's bedroom to retrieve the feather. The servant, a man called Guscio the Mask, sees a serving girl named Nota and leaves his post guarding his master's things to woo her. Giovanni and Biagio enter brother's Cipolla's lodging and find the feather. It looks like a parrot. The two men take the feather and fill the box it rested in with charcoal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Carl, for giving us the report for day 9 and day 10. Now let's proceed to the analysis of the story, the Decameron. The Decameron is Giovanni Boccaccio's 14th century masterpiece. It completed around 252, secluding themselves in a country estate and telling stories to keep their mind happily occupied. The young gentlefolk leave their homes in Florence, hoping to keep the deadly contagion at bay and leave their fears behind, at least for a while. And there you go, Boccaccio tells us that this catastrophe led to the total breakdown of the society, and the people began to act uneven and naturally toward each other. Victims died helplessly, while their neighbors, their parents, watched. No one trusted anyone. Parents would even take care of their sick children. It is quite sad news to hear that for fellow Italians. Boccaccio estimates that more than 100,000 people were severely infected of this epidemic. Over half of the city's inhabitants died within the walls of Florence between March to July 1348. He even describes physical, social, and psychological sufferings, writing of people dying in the street, rotting corpses, plague, boils, swollen glands known as the burbos, some of the size of eggs, others as large as apples, which is quite alarming. Bruises and the blackening skin that foreshadowed death that called the Black Death of the century. Boccaccio's introduction is followed by 10 sections containing short stories, and each of the short stories or each of the book 10 storytellers tell us a story for 10 days. Derived from Greek, the word Decameron means 10 days. The Decameron was the first prose masterpiece to be written in Tuscan vernacular, making it more accessible to those who can read and Latin. And now let's proceed to the themes of the Decameron stories. First themes, we have love, friendship, lies and deceit, women, suffering, and religion. When it comes to love, almost all the stories contains love. Important message seems to be that love is natural and powerful, a force that cannot be denied. It overwhelms reason and common sense, and it transforms people. Next, we have lies and deceit. As we have already listened to the stories of the summary, the day one already contains lies and deceit of the pastor. Next, we have the women. Boccaccio's claim in his introduction that he's creating this work for the ladies, whom he loves and has been dedicated to since his youth. He even mentioned this on the introductory part. And next is friendship. There are stories in the Decameron that relate to friendship. Next, we have the suffering. Suffering because the need of escaping the reality due to the current situation happening in the Florence, Italy. If you can imagine the horror, the sickness, the decay, the bodily suffering and loneliness of those people, that would have been the daily reality during the plague years. And lastly, we have the religion, contains mockery, blasphemy to the officers of the church. And now let's proceed to the characters. The characters, even though it consists of 100 novels, we are going to focus the main characters of the Decameron. We have at least 10 characters, and they call the Brigata. And these Brigata consist of 7 ladies and 3 gentlemen, namely Pampinea, Fiammetta, Philomena, Emilia, Lauretta, Nephili, and Eliza. And for the 3 gentlemen, we have Pampilo, Philostrato, and Uneo. And now let's proceed to the tone of the story. The tone of the story is satirical and ironic. Dark stories are present too. Most characters are victims of lost love and tragic deaths. Some are just painful to read. And now let's have the genre. The genre is prose novel. Ironic and satiric. Ironic because it entails happy ending when in fact we don't know what happened to them further of the story. Satire, folktales, tragedies, stories. And now let's proceed to the title. The title uses a pattern of the Hexameron of Saint Ambrose series of 6 sermons on creation. And on the other hand, the Decameron, which is 10. Deca means 10. So the 10-day story is 10 novels each day. The setting of the story is in Florence, Italy, during 48 and during the bubonic plague that hit to the Italy. Dawn of Italian Renaissance and the palace. The palace is a beautiful and natural spaces with walled gardens, fountains, and flowers. It's a classic place for an Italian setting. Writing style, we have the polished, elegant vernacular prose, descriptive, and conversational vernacular. And lastly, we have the narrator point of view. We have the narrator use the first person and the third person point of view. The Tales of the Decameron is a tale that connects us during the troubled times, and it signifies the power of storytelling, that it heals a heart and it comforts a soul. This is Kurt Arandan. Each week, we deliver the best and hard-hitting literary news. I am the analysis and the introduction part of the Decameron.